Uh, let's go. Shout out to it here. Let me nice. Nice. Shout out to Lunar Lawn. I guess we're live, ladies and gentlemen. So shout out to the snowflakes era, so to speak, the ambition here. We lead from the front, guys. We find the lions to lead the lambs. I hope everyone can hear. The intention of this, shout out to AB8948. The intention here, right, is really it's all of it. We're going to never before has it been more incumbent upon each of us all around the world to create whatever the heck our tomorrow is going to be, right? That's on us, and so shout out to the big dude looking at the charts. Okay, so again, this is not just a crypto centric thing. This is a community culture. It's education, guys. We need to cook freedom recipes together. Specifically, this is not my intention isn't to be a like a Cardano only sort of endeavor. It's the intention is for it to be all of it. Because I mean, look at what Sailor's doing with Bitcoin, guys. And there's a lot there. That's a different strategy and whatnot. That's a conversation for a different day. But I was thinking just before I was brushing my teeth and whatnot before going live, and uh yeah, man. I was thinking there are not a lot of folks that are talking about what Bitcoin and what crypto and what blockchain is without some kind of weird slant. Have you ever noticed we never really hear about these projects in the context of interoperability? And that is a special sauce argument that Cardano is has the potential to make that no other blockchain can, right? We know that we can become, shout out to Wolfoden, we can become the home of good hope, guys. GUUT, right? The Grand Unified UTXO theory. And we know that hope is an acronym. That is how oppressed people escape. So let's get to it, man. We're cooking this recipe for Matrix escape artists, guys. That's you, that's me, that's everyone out there in the land of the free. So shout out to the global community. Shout out to these markets, guys. So for context, it is what is it? It's June 8th, 2026. Bitcoin's up about 2.8% on the 24-hour, according to Coin Market Cap, it looks like. So 63.8, guys. Unfortunately, we heard about some aggressions happening overseas. That's messed up. Peace be upon the people of the world. We got to stop wasting our money, guys. So talking about that from the dollar, the printer's going to go burr, right? We know that we're printing $1 billion every day that we are in Iran, on top of all of the other spending that we're doing. So we know that the dollar is not the place to hold our value, right? We know that the dollar used to be backed by gold in 1971. We decoupled from the gold standard. Interestingly enough, that's also when Davos and the World Economic Forum kicked off. Coincidence? I think not. So the point being, Bitcoin is positioned to be the only asset on the international stage that can allow America and United States interests to maintain sort of economic dominance in international trade. Cardano's use case. So my intention also, I'm not trying to be negative on the powers that be, on Chuck, Fred, the founding entities, right? We've got to acknowledge the situation, the ineptitude of spending, but at the same time, more importantly, we have to levy a path forward. We have to say, okay, how can we do better? And we can do better, guys. We can do so much better. Like for instance, there is no long game view that we're hearing from like a Charles and a whatnot. And there's this pivot to midnight network. And there's been this extraction of capital. And what's interesting is in order to maximally advantage both blockchains working together cooperatively is really the secret sauce there. When we look at ADA's price performance, guys, we've booked probably 10% of the profit that we should have. Yeah, we should have been accumulating between say $2 and $5. And why didn't we? Well, as a quick little tour of the founding entities for folks that don't know about Cardano's founding entities. There are three of them. It took me a long time to even suss all that out, but there's three of them. They're input output, formerly known as like IOG or IOHK, input output Hong Kong. It's a whole thing. But you had IOG, you've got Cardano Foundation, and you've got Emergo. To the best of our anyone with their eyes open and looking at, okay, what has been the value add from each of these entities, Emergo has contributed almost nothing. They were given, however, about 2 billion ADA. For folks that don't know what that means for the last 5 years, every 5 days they've been being paid directly into self-custody. Well, they've had that power. Now we don't know what they've done with their money, what they've done with, now ostensibly they were supposed to advocate for Cardano and help build and do all kinds of shit, whatever, like all of these entities in a different way. IO, input output, Charles's main situation there has been kind of the research and the development arm. Cardano Foundation has been supposed to be like business development, strategic relationships and whatnot. And then Emergo, who knows? They gave us a wallet, Yoroi. And what's messed up is knowing that governance was coming, they also baked into the wallet. If you used the wallet that one of these founding entities developed, you would basically be auto-delegating your power, your vote, into their hands. So before asking for money from treasuries and stuff, these founding entities have been privy to a lot of money. Let's just say passively generating with the stake pools more than like 40 million USD every year, depending on the price of ADA. But it's substantial. And so recently it made news. It made the rounds that the Cardano Foundation or the Cardano Summit, the people of Cardano said, we're not going to pay for that. We're not going to foot that bill. And why should we of Cardano? Because when we, or Charles, like a year ago, their Cardano, well, input output, Charles's, arm asked for something like 90 million ADA on top of all of the, the institutional advantage. I'm hearing stuff, people are talking about, guy had like 100,000, some crazy number of Bitcoin, from Genesis, all this kind of stuff. So the point is, they don't need the money. If they need the money, then they're not the ones. If you cannot make your money make money, if you have billions of dollars or assets under management, and you can't figure out how to throw a party, it's like, if there is a reason for us to have a Cardano Summit and we can actually get a value return, establish strategic relationships, get things like stable coins, if crazy work, guys, crazy work. You know what I mean? It's things like that. It's things like stable coins, ways, necessities for our blockchain to be competitive in the market. Anyway, goal is to go for about an hour. Shout out again to AB and Wolfoden. Nice. Just looking at markets and whatnot. Oh shit, dude, this is dope. My screen just did something interesting. That's cool. Then that's another thing, guys. I'm learning. I'm putting together the tools. We got our USDCX, but liquidity is not great. Amen, Wolfoden. Amen. So here's one good thing. That I heard they recently did. They, I believe it was Cardano Foundation, recently minted like 9 million USDCX, but it's to pay for contracts and whatnot. But that is kind of the two birds with one stone. If you know that you're going to pay IO engineers, for instance, you know what I mean? You're going to say, hey, we want 90 million ADA. It would make more sense if they did say, hey, look, let's put that TVL on chain, and then we're going to pay our engineers over the course of the year. But all of Cardano benefits from having that repository of liquidity. Shout out to Strike Perpetuals, man. Strike. See, there we go. When we talk about the solutions that we have, Strike is doing great work. Keep doing what you're doing, Shan. But yeah, man, the USDCX, the liquidity is not great. Yeah, it is unfortunate. And is it a coincidence that the majority of the liquidity is on the midnight side? Is that right? Right? Like, it seems a lot like there's been liquidity extraction on the ADA side, and they've been rolling out, this, stable coin liquidity and whatnot on the night pairing of the token. When you get down into like liquidity pools and then decentralized exchanges and whatnot. And that's a whole other conversation too. Like, and again, I want to focus on going forward, and amen, bro. Strike is a G. Strike is incredible. For folks that don't know what I'm talking about, there at Strike Perps is there, which is Strike Perpetuals. They're a project that's like under the hood. It's running on Cardano, but they're going cross chain. They've got NVIDIA live. Damn well SpaceX is coming. And that's a whole thing, guys. Also, when we're looking at these markets, SpaceX IPO is coming. We got Anthropic IPO coming. And I'm telling you, that capital, when it's made, see, bro, when you really look at the calendar, I'm not going to be the one that's going to sit here surprised if Bitcoin isn't challenging a new all-time high by December. Right? Because there's a reason that like a Nancy Pelosi can outperform Wall Street and whatnot, and when Larry Fink was coming back from Davos, and again, folks that don't know who Larry Fink is, he's the head of like BlackRock, Blackstone, all this kind of shit. He's the head of pretty much the largest institutional asset manager like in the world. He manages something like over some ungodly number of trillions in assets under management. And one of the things that he said is we've got to grow. The only way that the U.S. domestic economy is going to be okay at all, to avoid the catastrophe that is coming from the printer going burr. The strength of our dollar is weakening, and so the only way to allow the dollar to maintain commensurate economic leverage with its introduction into circulation, we need to create actual domestic growth. So these are things, and one of the things that Larry Fink noted was that we have too many centralized large winners. We need more medium and small winners. We need to build the whole pyramid, because right now the plenty is going to like the Amazons, the Walmarts, the NVIDIAs, the SpaceXs, the Teslas, and there's not sufficient, it's like the whole thing, like Jeff Bezos needs one pair of pants, right? You give Jeff Bezos $1 trillion or Elon $1 trillion, that's great. They can do a lot with that, but at the end of the day, right, they can only buy so many pairs of pants. Elon Musk is having a bunch of babies, and shout out to him for it. But he can afford it. Most people cannot afford it. But so the point is if you have every family is able to go and have that trade-off, say, hey, I need some new shoes, I need some new pants. Well, then the productive output is actually maximized. So Larry Fink, some of the things that I was taking away was, one, he was contextualizing the U.S. economy in 1929 or 1929 and 2029. So, right, like the Great Depression kicked off in America in 1929. And so when the largest institutional asset manager in the world who's also like the ceremonial or interim head of Davos, bro, I'm listening, and I'm right. You got to be ready. If Larry Fink, and then when he also says that, yeah, we've got to grow our way out of it. And then he says there's only 2 or 3 real contenders in the space for where that growth is going to come from. You're looking at data centers, you're looking at AI, you're looking at blockchain. We're having this big SpaceX moment and whatnot. So, so the cool thing is blockchain, Bitcoin, Cardano live in one of those primary pillars of value creation. And most of us also know that blockchain is the native monetization layer for artificial intelligence. That's not sufficiently priced in yet. Think about it. If you're going to run a bunch of, agentic, whatever, high frequency trading, all the different kind of stuff, bro, I was, shout out to Mark Cuban, dude. Shout out to Mark Cuban and Cost Plus Drugs, and insurance. Because I want to say this, we can eat in the same way that banks should be forced to compete with AI and blockchain, so should private insurance. Because when you really look at it, insurance fundamentally is probabilistic money shuffling. Okay. And it's based on like if Nancy's 60 with a heart murmur, Timmy's 20 and so you charge Nancy more, you charge Timmy less a month, and it goes into a socialist pot of funds. And depending on who needs it, the socialist pot of funds, private insurance is just as socialist as like Medicare or healthcare in Europe or Canada or Australia, where they have that baseline of care. As a matter of fact, America is the only nation where healthcare is a privilege, not a right. It's the number one cause of personal bankruptcy in the United States, and we got to change that, especially in a time when we have people that are we are sacrificing American families, people that are trying to pay mortgages, and keep the economy going, and we're going, hey, sorry, AI does your job better, so you got 6 weeks, thanks for your the work, well, bet, for free markets. But if we are willing to sacrifice American families and families around the world, globally, families on the altar of creative destruction, in the same way that the typewriter was overtaken by the personal computer, and the horse and buggy was overtaken by the automobile, right? It would have been wrong for them to, like, Congress to say, hey, Henry Ford, you can't make so many automobiles, you know what I mean, because we're selling less horse saddles. It's like, bro, adapt, and so, like, with Clarity Act, we're seeing, and for folks that don't know what Clarity Act is, um that's basically just legislation in the United States of America that differentiates things like Bitcoin from utility coins, from like meme coins and all this kind of stuff. It gets laws and lawyers and regulation right, and it removes ambiguity such that larger capital flows can go in, without going, oh gosh, is this, what is this questionable, whatever, not to say that that's not, I mean, right now, one of the reasons they're kicking the can down the road is there's power in some of that ambiguity. Luckily with Strike, we can now be incentivized to provide liquidity on it. Amen, AB 8948. Yeah, man. So circling back to that, circling back to the cool stuff building on Cardano, and moving forward as a community. So one, I think we draw a line at Laos. I think we draw a line at Paris. Okay. Because dude, you have billions of dollars, right? And like folks are talking about in the chat, strike, and it's so smart, dude. And they're yes, they called it like credit line, which is really just a mind model that you can use for it. But basically, you can provide liquidity for Strike perpetuals. So they have, I don't know, go check them out. Like, they do all kinds of stuff. Like, they've got like Bitcoin perpetuals, they've got ADA perpetuals, they've got Night perpetuals, they've got Nvidia went live. I think they might even have some Solana stuff, or Ethereum coming to Solana. They're expanding. They're not playing, dude. It's perpetuals. You know what I mean? And so what they just recently did, though, they've said, hey, if you want to add liquidity, you could, because, like, imagine you've got $50,000 in assets that is like your investment fund, on your crypto, and then that's your like self custody portion, maybe you've got some assets on a centralized exchange and your Fidelity, whatever the hell it is, but you go, hey, like, I can get better returns by maybe providing liquidity in a Strike perpetuals platform, but then what if I can also access stablecoin liquidity? So could you imagine providing something like Bitcoin or ADA or Midnight or Litecoin or Monero or Zcash? See, this is the future for Cardano, guys. That is because, think about here's I will always respect Charles Hoskinson for this, and tip of the cap, right? Shadow and light, nobody's perfect, nobody gets it, all that, right? One of the things that I really will always respect is he chose, right, to do the hard engineering and mathematics to add that, smart contract expressiveness to the UTXO model chosen by Satoshi Nakamoto for Bitcoin, the EUTXO model. And so now, by saying, because for folks that know, Charles was associated with Ethereum, and I often say that Ethereum chose the sprint for the cash before the crash approach, where there were known issues. There were like known scalability issues, even some security issues and whatnot. But they knew they could gate adoption, one, which is also why when it's VC supported and it's like very it's an exclusive club, you actually serve many masters. You create this sort of impression that it's of a moneyed class, and you keep that chain usage low while right, because what you're doing is you're saying, we're going to get this VC money now, we're going to mint some ape yacht whatever, some monkeys on a blockchain NFT. Shout out to NFTs, shout out to an NFT renaissance on Cardano, shout out to Nas. She's a Cardano artist. I believe her family's from I believe even Iran. Shout out again, man. Shout out to the people of Iran, man. Hearing about just whether it's war in Ukraine, war in Iran, it's such a waste of our time, our money, our blood, our treasure globally. We all got fingers and toes, yo, So stupid. But anyway, and so that's like, so when people talk about like Bitcoin fixes and blockchain and Cardano and all these things, it's about decoupling money from state, from having a check and a balance on things like the military industrial complex, and we can do that with blockchain technology, we really can carry forward the Promethean fire of freedom lit by Satoshi Nakamoto on Halloween night 2008 with the release of the white paper, in the Genesis block, January 3rd, 2009, which is for the first time, every person on the planet with an internet connection and a smart device could custody the capital that they create in a finite life. That is powerful. That is true economic sovereignty at all points of the globe, you know? And that is cool. And you know what? Another thing, the fun. I joke sometimes about. There's one thing that I appreciate about the definition of a currency. There are three fundamental qualities that define a currency. And the cool thing and the powerful thing, and a piece of powerful information that we need to communicate. Like, how do we get the people onboarded? Part of the education is to understand that we can literally create a better currency, because the three things that define a currency, and we already have, is one, and the first one's the hardest, a mutually agreed upon medium of exchange. Two, store of value. And three, a unit of account. If we get those three things, boom, classical definition of a currency is fulfilled, right? So for instance, if you get on a plane in Dallas, Texas, and you get a bar of gold and a bar of silver and Bitcoin and Litecoin and Cardano and Monero, Zcash, Caspa, Dogecoin, I mean, it's pretty wild. Now, what there's things also, there's a concept called a sovereign digital asset. Also has three things that define it. And sovereign digital assets, there's only a handful of them that exist, but they're assets that fulfill that all points capital expression, right? Whereas like with Tether, you can freeze it. Same thing with like, man, when you look at Solanas and Ethereums, you can blacklist addresses. But again, we even talk about chain bloat. How many people are aware that Solana's ledger is like 600 terabytes? That's crazy, right? Whereas Bitcoin is like twice as old, and it's about a terabyte to hold the entire history of Bitcoin. So there's these fundamental things that are pieces of education. But yeah, so when we realize, oh shit, sovereign digital asset, it's got to have a hard cap supply. It's got to have a shared UTXO basis with Bitcoin, or just a UTXO basis. And three, it has to have global decentralization and distribution of the validation and consensus mechanism, and the publicly distributed ledger associated therewith. On Solana, they all 500 gigabytes failed transactions to the Google Drive chain database every day. Yeah. Add 500 gigabytes a day. I've heard about that. I truly believe that the future of Solana is death by chain bloat, or they have to admit that they've been acquired by like a Coinbase or an Amazon or some shit, where it's like Solana by da 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 da. Because the infrastructure bloat, like maybe they pivot da da da. But when we look at the choices they're making, as the chat's mentioning, it's just huge. It's huge. It's absurd. Like from a first principles thing. Like, and when you think about that, to buy that much hard drive space is more than like $250,000. That's why the validator set of Solana is shrinking. You know what I mean? Because man, my hair's bugging me. I just got out of the shower, and it's there's so it's freaking me out. But yeah, man. So anyway, Bitcoin, 1 terabyte. Litecoin, 100 gigabytes, guys. 100 gigabytes for 14 years, coming up on 15 in October. And so when we think about, oh my gosh, Cardano can offer smart contracts to Litecoin, Dogecoin, Monero, and Zcash. I think those narratives right there, like, and especially Monero, because think about it, mutually agreed upon medium of exchange, the first definition of a currency. Okay, that is one of the weaknesses of Monero. That's also why, like, and I'll say this, there is no asset better positioned to be the decentralized freedom liquidity and freedom capital of the people than the 84 million Litecoin. So to me, the game is, because bro, we can flash honesty on the network. Think about it, okay? And here's another piece of really important, like, education. We need to migrate supply from centralized exchanges into self-custody, because As we reduce the float available to centralized custodians, they can play less dashboard and float settlement time games and shit. Because this way, when a Michael Saylor says, "Hey, I want $1 billion of Bitcoin by the end of the week or by the middle of the month," well, then if they've only if a Coinbase, let's say, has 20,000 Bitcoin on their books, and Michael's out here, and all these institutional players are suddenly demanding 30,000, well, then 10,000 of that is beyond their available means, even. So they've got to bid the market. That's how these guys play the spread game. Have you noticed that? Well, a couple things. When the market's cooking, can't log into your Coinbase, can't log into your Kraken, can't log into your Bybit, can't log into your Binance. You know what I'm saying? Like, they play that game. But have you noticed also that if you want to like sell your asset, you want to sell your Bitcoin, they'll give you 74 for it, 74K, let's say. If you want to buy your Bitcoin, it's 76, right? That crazy spread. So there's things like that. Whereas if they have less float, if they can, do less, oh, we're good for it. Well, then the spot price that we all see is not determined by these centralized players. But think about this. How many people, if you open up your phone and you like, how many people in most people's phones could right now impose 1 unit of honesty on the 21 million Bitcoin set, right? Which would be to buy a Bitcoin on a centralized exchange and move it into self-custody, right? Right now, that's 63,744 grand. Brad, not many people have that, right? Whereas you look at Litecoin, okay? So it's a 4-to-1 ratio. There's something called a Bitcoin normalized unit. So what you do is you take the maximum supply of the asset, you want to calculate it. So in this case, Litecoin has an 84 million unit max supply. You divide that by 21 million and you get 4, right? If we do this for Cardano, the number is 2,142.8. That's 45 billion divided by 21 million. I round it up to 2143 because it's easy, better marketing. Speaking of marketing, right? So for every 1 Bitcoin, there's 2,143 ADA. So if you want to get a normalized cost basis, right now, what ADA's at, and let's talk about that actually. So looking at the markets again, Bitcoin's actually up 2.59% in the last 24 hours. Litecoin's up 2.46, Solana up 3.29, and Cardano up 4.43. So relative to Bitcoin, we're actually outperforming 2.56 in the last 24, 4.43. So again, Cardano's well positioned, and actually the chart's looking kind of beautiful. And it's 16, just a shade under 17 cents right now is where Cardano's at. So think about the cost of that, right? Like, I mean, yeah. Let's sorry guys, shit, yeah. Let's see. I don't know if you guys are if you guys can can see any of this shit or not. But yeah, so it's $364. Beautiful. 364.31 if you do 2143 times 17 cents. So get this, guys, it's $365 basically to impose a similar proportion of honesty on the market of the spot price with Cardano. For every 1 Bitcoin, there's 2143. For Litecoin, there's only 4. And at Litecoin's current price of $43, that's like 170, $180. You know what I mean? Less than $200. So when we start thinking about that, and when we start teaching our community about that, we begin to exponentiate the value that we create. We begin to take more control over the market price of these assets. That's how they got Zcash to run and Monero to run. The holder base knew what time it was. That's how meme coins run when they're done right. Shout out to Sneck, right? So because we're talking about building solutions and shit. And again, shout out to the Litecoin fam. Please do, I guess as they say, like, subscribe to the channel. The goal here is to create really an emergent media entity. Ideally, we create a 24/7 media empire called like the Signal or the Band or whatever, right? And we have a bunch of different folks in different time zones. We go on multiple, because the goal here is to get on YouTube, on Kick, on Twitch, on TikTok, on X, and then get a constellation of folks. So it's not just me, but we need more people because it can't be just Chuck, and unfortunately, Chuck and the Cabal have kind of he's made himself the face. He likes to have his cake and eat it too. He likes to be like, I have no control. Meanwhile, you know what I mean? He's paying for, man, and we all see this bullshit, paying like, say David G or Wendy O, I mean, it's just to try to PR and spin a narrative because he knows he's, and all the founding entities have really, really failed. Or at least could have really done a lot better than they did. So yeah, I mean, as far as things that the Cardano community. So what is Cardano Collective, right? So that's what the goal here, okay, is to create basically an emergent fourth entity. Right now, we've got the three founding entities, all of them largely determined by Charles, over the course of time. So Cardano's around what, 8 or 9 years old, relative to Bitcoin. Again, Bitcoin's about 17 years, been going for 17 years, bro. January 2009. Shout out to it. Litecoin's been going for 14, October 2011. But yeah, so Cardano's been cooking for a while. For the first couple of years, there wasn't even a blockchain, and that's part of the reason why the Cardano cabal formed. In the early days, it was a group of true believers that rallied around and said, "We see what you're cooking. We believe in you." And it's not all bad. Like, I get it, but we really should have been thinking, about efficiency of our capital. Like, man, you ask some of these folks that have been in the Cardano community about like the word is there was a calendar. There was some sort of like a rewards calendar that we paid someone like $1 million ADA for. Bruh. So it was just like to calculate how much ADA that you get over like by staking or whatever it is. I don't know what it was doing, but it's crazy, and again, when you have these founding entities that have billions of dollars USD worth of assets, in multiple things, who knows what they're all holding. But again, like something like a Cardano Foundation was able to stake to a bunch of pools. As a matter of fact, Cardano Foundation announced like 8-9 months ago now that they were going to remove delegation from a bunch of stake pool operators. Those are called SPOs is the acronym, but stake pool operators. And then delegate them to their own pools because to economically like persist. This is the Cardano Foundation, because ADA. But again, it's like if you guys were doing your job, if ADA was $3.14, $5, everybody would be good. You know what I mean? And so that's how you guys should have been making your money, not by selling on the community's heads. So when you think about that though, right? So and there's, talk about the K parameter and again, how these things, for folks who don't know what the K parameter is, it's basically the optimum number of saturated stake pools participating on the Cardano blockchain. Okay. And that number was around 400. Guess about how many stake pools the Cardano Foundation was delegating to. So when you start peeling back the onions and you go, wow, why did the Cardano stake pools rally for this event or that event or whatever? It's like, well, the powers that be have been paying their bills, and so it's brilliant. It's powerful. Like Ouroboros proof of stake, man, Cardano's more than 30,000 times as energetically efficient as Bitcoin, shout out to things like Minotaur though, where the future is again interoperability. Grand unified UTXO theory, but there's a great paper called Minotaur, which is a multi-resource consensus. There's a paper published, it has been proven that proof of work and proof of stake together are optimally fungible with respect to validation and consensus, on these blockchains. So there's a lot of special sauce there. So like, for instance, there's another Charles and CF relation is rather complex. Amen, bro. Yeah, it is. It is, right? But yeah, so like think about that whole narrative. Like a lot of people like to doom out like Bitcoin, saying, "Oh, it's going to die because it's going to be too expensive to validate the blockchain." So, it'll die by energy costs. It's like, bro, Cardano's got your back. So that kind of shit. You know what I mean? Because, dude, every Cardano SPO. Shout out to Fluid Tokens and El Raulito and Mateo and all this. And their Bifrost Bridge. Which can be extended into the notion of like a mithril meadow is what I call it. So, and shout out to Mithril, which I saw there was a space live. People were talking about Mithril. Basically that's a signature scheme. So basically imagine you've been participating in the Cardano blockchain for like 24 months, right? So provably you can say, yeah, this hardware's been running, been validating, have had stake, minting blocks, all this. You have a record of provably being a good actor in the blockchain. What we can do is we can add an extra weighting to your signature, your contribution. When you say this is the current state of the Cardano ledger, and again, far lighter weight ledger than say Solana, or Ethereum or many of these other blockchains. But especially Solana. Solana is, again, I'm not saying you can't make money in Solana, but it's not best practices, guys. There's some things that you do just because that's where the market is. Solana spent a lot of money. It's like McDonald's. McDonald's is terrible for you. It's poison. You know what I mean? Like alcohol. Now, I'm not saying, right, drink responsibly and all that, it's, but yeah, something like a Solana, they kind of sold the dream, but then they turned it into a messed up kind of casino. But the reality is there are people there. They've cultivated community, right? And remember the first definition of a currency: mutually agreed upon medium of exchange, the store of value in a unit of account, right? We know Bitcoin and Litecoin and Cardano, I would say not only do they fit those, but they also are sovereign digital assets, which means that you can spend them at all points of the globe with an internet connection and nothing can stop you. So you could go out. There's a point on the planet called Point Nemo. It's the distance that is furthest from any landmass in the world. And so you could get out there with Michael Saylor in a yacht, or the Cardone. Shout out to Grant and Gary Cardone and whatnot. Integrating Bitcoin and real estate. It's important to have these folks creating these models and proofing it. Yeah, there's many layers to it, man. And shout out to Fidelity and Bank of America giving their folks the green light to start having their financial advisors talk about Bitcoin and blockchain technologies. So again, guys, don't get caught slipping if and when Clarity gets passed and Bitcoin starts charging to a new all-time high before Christmas. Man, so many threads here. So many threads. I'm deep in the woods. Oh yeah. Sovereign digital assets, right? So you have the hard cap supply, which means you're instituting the gold condition, right? So as folks are successful in educating and teaching people about Bitcoin and Litecoin and Cardano and XRP and Solana and Ethereum and BNB and Caspa and Monero and Zcash and all these and Dogecoin and shit, then we get more of that mutual agreed upon medium of exchange and whatnot, Oh yeah. But we want to escape fiat inflation, right? That's another reason why first principles, right? Why I'm not out here really saying, oh, Ethereum and Solana is the way. Because for one, infinite number of dollars, infinite number of Ethereum and Solana. Whereas again, there's 21 million Bitcoin, there's 45 billion Cardano. You know what I mean? So these things are very powerful. And so you remove the printer from the system. You institute the gold condition, and that alone is so powerful because again, you can't tell me how many units of Ethereum are going to be in circulation in 30 years or Solana, So if I'm going to talk to a major, a major institutional player and say, hey, yo, here's why you should maybe look at getting some Bitcoin on your balance sheet. With Bitcoin, with the 21 million units of Bitcoin, we can say, yeah, bro, how much of the network do you own? Oh, you own 1% of the network? Well, then you will share in 1% of all global value that flows into Bitcoin. Think about that. Okay, so again, sovereign digital assets, hard cap supply, so that all value that flows into a finite network. It's so powerful, So like the 45 billion ADA, 21 million Bitcoin, 84 million Litecoin, whereas Dogecoin, infinite inflation. Monero is actually also infinitely inflationary. However, their inflationary policy, far healthier than the dollar. Both of them, actually. Both Dogecoin and Monero have less inflation built into their models than the US dollar. Monero actually is set to track pretty close, even though it has no limit. Its issuance rate tracks very close to where Bitcoin is. And Bitcoin basically will asymptotically approach the 21 million Bitcoin issued into circulation around the year 2140. So there's a lot there. So there's a lot of these education pieces, and so things like that, like hard cap supply, UTXO basis, global decentralization and distribution of the validation and consensus mechanism, and publicly distributed ledger associated therewith. That is a sovereign digital asset, right? Whereas something like Tether, they can stop it. Something like, again, a Solana, right? If we know that there's a very small validator set and you piss off some like nation state and they go, oh yeah, that's their addresses, right? If you've only got, like a Amazon web service level, entities like data, centers and whatnot, that can hold your blockchain. Well, then, basically there's people that they can call and say, hey, yo, blacklist those addresses. Whereas when the ledger is lightweight and all around the world, again, so when you know that Solana is more than 600 terabytes, Bitcoin's one, you know, Litecoin's 100 gigabytes, a tenth of a terabyte, you know, and then Cardano's somewhere, I think it's around 450 ish, you know, it's about half a terabyte ish, so much more lightweight, you know. And then also when you look at Cardano, the weight of the hardware and the cost of the hardware, you can spin up a fully validating Cardano node for less than like $2,000 worth of off-the-shelf hardware components. You know, so that's one of the powerful trade-offs with proof of stake energy efficiency as well. You know, whereas if you want to probabilistically participate in validation of the Bitcoin blockchain within a 1 week period, you've got to express more than $250,000 in capital to own enough energy and associated hardware and hash rate, essentially, is what you'd be bidding for, you know, and financing. So there's so many layers to this, and it's powerful. And all of these discussions, right? Why Charles isn't out here really, I think, doing a good job, you know, because his bills are paid, and a lot of the issues and like how the Cardano cabal formed really does have to do with social needs, you know, and ego, you know, because Charles's bills were paid when he came to Cardano with Bitcoin and Ethereum, you know, and for the first 2 years that Cardano existed, again, it was really just people believing, you know, and then the blockchains, you know, so it's like you can understand when you look at the genesis of it, like how a Cardano cabal, you know, forms. But to have allowed these privileged players to have so much sale pressure on our ecosystem, like that's the thing that really gets me, man, is like we've been paying these folks bills, dude. And all these, like, you know, when they're on the planes and they're going to these events and we see the same folks, year after year after year. And then we learn that Charles has hurt some relationships. So now you've got these folks that are like, can't, you know, hear no evil, speak no evil, whatever with Chuck, you know, Chuck can do no wrong, you know. And so then they also have these like inauthentic sort of, or these really difficult auspices to approach, like networking at events and shit. You know what I mean? So they've created this little insular island, you know, that's been about like, you know, assuaging or attempting to, you know, Charles's ego and whatnot, you know. And when you look at the people, the normal faces, the regular faces, bro, most of them have been paid. They've all been paid. You know what I mean? Even though because they'll be like, oh, I've never been paid by the Treasury, but Catalyst, you know, or allocation. And that's another thing, bro. These entities and a lot of these, you know, the usual suspects also get first crack at all of, like, again, speaking of something like Strike, you know, Strike is a hell of an asset, you know, but we've had so many things, man, and it's messed up, dude. I don't know what's going on with butane, you know. We've had like meld, we've had like, those are just like whole cloth extraction. But when you look at the charts and whatnot of all of the Cardano native assets where people haven't had stable coins, you know, and if we put on our a little bit of a tinfoil hat there, I really believe that it's more or less so that the powers that be, the fundamental, you know, the founding entities, could keep control over the ecosystem. Because if whatever you build is denominated in ADA, and Charles and the cabal have basically ADA by the balls, and they're all living off the sales pressure. So you make a great project, I say you don't have a stable coin you can escape to. So you just create cool shit and then pay me and my people. Lulls, GGs. You know what I mean? So we're done with that shit. We're done with that. You know what I mean? But yeah, so that's the other thing, is not only, you know, and have there been passive stake rewards, guys? Just that alone is crazy. And when you look at the funding from things like Catalyst, and you look at who's running it, like what provable competence, what construction of arguments and financial return and all this, you know. And then you realize that's the issue of a quid pro quo system, you know. I honestly, even things like this Draper proposal, I think that was pushed across the line to create more kind of an umbrella of cover, like, oh, we'll peel off a fat paycheck to folks, and then, oh, here comes Chuck and I, you know, and you know, and then Fred in his vest, you know. Jesus. You know, that was ridiculous. 70 million F and ADA should have been made into stablecoin liquidity and rich everyone. It's this kind of stuff. It's this kind of stuff. You know what I mean? So again, so when we talk about ways forward, talk about the Cardano collective, right? So shout out to the Cardano collective. They've got a yeah, actually, MV Charles has a personal SPO full up to 70 million. Oh yeah, yeah, it's about 70 million ADA. I think it's actually like 65ish now. And again, these are parameters that can be tweaked on Cardano. But yeah, you know, you can basically, so there's 45 billion total ADA in existence. I'm thinking about this. Um, what if we do, yeah, 45 billion and then we divide that by 60 million? Um 750. Interesting. So that'd be 750 stake pools if all 450 billion um if all 450 billion ADA were in circulation, and they're not. There's about 36 billion. And then we set the ideal the saturation for a stake pool at 60 million. We would have 750 fully saturated stake pools at 100% participation. It's pretty interesting. So just like thinking about K parameter, but then when you think we've got about 36 billion ADA in circulation, what up, Chicken Wang? Um, um, yeah, yeah. This is Cliff K, by the way. Let's go. But shout out to CK and shout out to Chicken Wang. And yeah, folks call me CK as well, so you can call me CK. 45 billion, yeah, divided by 6,750 is how many fully saturated SPOs. We know that the K parameter is, I believe it's around 400. So Cardano's dialed into I know it is, Chicken. You know, this is the first time I've met you though, you know. But nah, bro, it's good to see you, man. It's good to see you. And again, yeah, shout out to everyone rolling through the room. The goal here, man, yeah, dude. Shout out to this guy Chicken, right? So I've got my other friend. I've got a friend CK. He's old thing. There's time travelers involved. It's crazy. And shout out to Oz, bro. We've got folks in the community that have been coming up on hard times, like so many Americans, so many people all around the world, you know, that are having to figure it out. I'm with you, bro. That's part of this. You know, that is part of this. Is we got to cook this freedom recipe together. Many hands make for light work, and together we are strong. In fact, together we are indomitable. We are unstoppable. We are free. You know, and we can get there with the 21 million Bitcoin, the 84 million Litecoin, the 45 billion ADA, the 24 billion Midnight. So we talking about that too. You know, but yeah, man, shout out to Oz. Our boy Oz is out there. You know, he's looking for work and whatnot. You know, shout out again, like folks like Chicken. You know, because these have been hard times on Cardano. Charles and Fred, and all y'all that have had your bills paid, and then have the audacity to do these asks like you're the U.S. government. Like that's what's killing me, bro. Is like we and Charles, what a shadow and light, right? Like I respect the fact that he did the made the hard choice. Let's get smart contract expressiveness to the UTXO model of Bitcoin. You know, get the EUTXO thing. Shout out to it. That's powerful. Want to give him also props. He spoke at he went to DC and he basically spoke on behalf of the entire industry, which actually, right, like he would have been well within his rights to just be like, oh yeah, by the way, you know, Cardano's doing some cool shit. I don't think he said it once. I don't think he said the name of Cardano once. You know, he just advocated for the space. So yeah, shout out to that, to making that choice. But yeah, bro, like, so Charles also will talk about like wastefulness in the government and da 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 da, and he's classically a libertarian. Shout out to Ron Paul, bro. Like, talk about someone that's just aged like a fine wine, bro. Like, and just his whole conversation that he was having about decoupling from the gold standard. Like, bro, if you go back to Bill Clinton era, the national debt was like 6 trillion. Guys, we're over 40 billion now. I mean, not trillion, 40 trillion. Or we will be by the end of the year, bro. I am hearing such gnarly numbers about the magnitude of printing that's going to occur before the end of this year. It's bullish for Bitcoin. It's bullish for all of blockchain. You know, anyone that can actually get an idea cooking and start cultivating community, getting people excited, getting people participating, getting people educated, right? For folks that know about Cardano, bro, that is one of Cardano's strengths. You know, there's a lot of downsides about it being made into an island. There's a lot of downsides to the value extraction, the liquidity extraction, because it has been hard times out here, bro. Many people have lost a lot of money, a lot. and are having to pivot and do all kinds of stuff, and you know, and that's another, again, a motivation for this is we got to create these new recipes because again, AI job displacement and whatnot is real. I do not envy anyone that has been looking at the job market in whatever your domain is, unless you are in a trade. Trades shining, bro. That's going to be a six-figure situation real quick if you're good with a trade. But yeah, man, a lot of these like white collar level situations. Woo-wee. It's, I know a lot of folks with engineering degrees that have been out of work, and we hear about these layoffs from these like Cisco's and Amazons, and it's just wild, bro. But all is not lost, And man, and we look at college, a new model for college, bro. Talking about crypto hope hubs and hope houses. Imagine, because dude, right? Like if I was given a choice, I'm gonna live in a sardine can like a dorm for 4 years with a bunch of friends. That's cool. But I'm going to work really hard for other people, professors and whatnot. Go again, 50K in debt, leave with a piece of paper, and who knows what kind of job market. Or, right, I'm 19, it's chicken and Wolfwood and AB, just the folks in the chat and I, right? Let's say we're all growing up, we're all today faced with the realities of the market. And we go, hold up. You can't write off student loan debt, but you can write off, say, like a business debt or declare bankruptcy or these kinds of, there's different options when you start a business. So then suddenly you go, hold up. What if 4 to 6 of us at this local high school, what if we got together, we decided to be entrepreneurial, right? Take out some small business loans. We go to a state where real estate's affordable. Could we own a house together in 4 years? How much equity could we establish in a house in 4 years? And the basic model would be this. We'll work part-time at the local diner, the local pizza shop, the local coffee shop. We'll teach them about the advantages because they're probably going to be boomer-run businesses. We'll teach them about how they can improve their balance sheets by incorporating blockchain technologies at the point of sale. Like, bro, we accept Bitcoin, we accept Litecoin, we accept Cardano here, we accept Midnight here, we accept Monero and Zcash, whatever, right? Because think about that, right? You pick something like Bitcoin or Litecoin or Cardano. In one move, accepting that at the point of sale for your pizza, like a large pizza these days is expensive as hell, bro. You get a really nice pizza, get an extra large, easily over $40. You get a $40 large pizza. Could you imagine offering 10% on Saturday nights for that pizza? And why would that small business do that? Well, in that one move, you say, hey, look, you pay me in Bitcoin, I'll take 10% off your order, right? And you have just a QR code. Or shout out to like Ada Handle, makes it really easy. It's like $ and then whatever. So like Nancy's Pizza, Mountain Pizza, Billy's Pizza, whatever the hell it is, right? Whatever your business is, right? And they go boop, they pay you in Bitcoin, and you get a 10% discount. That business escapes fiat inflation as a baseline. And then we're talking about fluid tokens and strike perpetuals are offering ways in which you can make that Bitcoin that you just received as a small town pizza or diner or auto mechanic or glass repair shop or whatever you do, any small business, right? So this becomes the new model for young folks is what if they become entrepreneurs and again, work part-time in those local businesses, teach them, and then creating content, telling the story about raging against the dying of the light, proofing this new model when they broke college and they broke our money. Right? I mean, dude, people suddenly, these young folks should be holding those local jobs at the coffee shop, not because they even need the paycheck anymore. Their TikTok does more numbers. They're getting paid there. But the people like to see, right, something like Chicken and I working at the local da-da-da-da-da, but meanwhile, we're making $250,000 just on our Twitch and our Kick. And then on the other side, right, what do we do with the other hours? We're back at the home with our homies, right? In this alternate reality where we're high school, college age young folks that are deciding maybe we should be entrepreneurial. Maybe we should look about creating value in AI and blockchain. Maybe we should look at the ways in which, again, you create this virtuous cycle where at the end of 4 years, you're not $50,000 in debt that you can't declare bankruptcy on and walk away from. Education debt is real bad. The number one cause of bankruptcy in the United States, unfortunately, is medical debt, right? Talk about, again, blockchain and AI can also make insurance wildly more efficient for everyone. But yeah, man, these are some of the really exciting things that we should be talking about. That should be part of what crypto is. Because, bro, the Solana, the pump and dump, the meme coin trenches crap, man, has really done a number on the PR and the ways in which what people think the space is. But the reality is, it's hope. Literally, it might be the only peaceful free market. Well, I believe that it is very likely the only peaceful free market solution that the people still have to peacefully decouple money from state, to get more representative government in, say, the United States with Citizens United and whatnot, when we know these folks are not working in our interests, And that's one of my chief frustrations with someone like an Elizabeth Warren. And again, I agree with her on healthcare. Yes, we can do better, 100%. Every other nation spends way less. And again, and no one's going bankrupt. I think about this all the time, bro. Like, could you imagine being like, I've been thinking about this, like a young couple, 26 years old, they just graduated, college and whatnot. Maybe they're thinking about having a family, but not yet, but they want to start a business. So they're like, yo, we're going to move to Colorado. We're going to have a coffee and cannabis shop. And it's going to be awesome, right? You and me, babe, da, 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 da. And then imagine this young couple moves to Colorado, takes out a small business loan, say 87 grand, and that's cheap, right? They got a cool little da 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 da. But remember, in America, your healthcare is largely tethered to your employer. So then you've got this young couple riding their bikes to the coffee shop in the morning, going down that hill, and then boom, they fall off the bike, snap a leg. Easy 100 G's. Easy 100 G's. If you get in an ambulance, man, right? And if it's like a serious fracture, like shout out to man, Anderson Silva, GOAT, but Conor McGregor, Chris Weidman, these folks that have had those gnarly ass shin, like the leg breaks where your bone comes through your skin, things like that. You're not getting away. I mean, that level is like $1 million, dude. Like, well, especially the way they do it. But the point is, that is how folks go bankrupt. So think about that. Like, you're a young entrepreneur in America, and so you've got these young people. They're starting their business. But again, now that they don't have a classical employer, now they're in it for themselves. So they got to see to their health care. And did they do that? Did they cover those bills? So again, America needs solutions for this. We cannot allow that shit to be. So when an Elizabeth Warren, again, and when I'm with her on something like healthcare, we can do it better. That's a great discussion we can have. And again, shout out to Mark Cuban. Shout out to Cost Plus Drugs. If people don't know what the hell that is, if you have a prescription and it's super, super expensive, you might be able to get a price on it at Cost Plus. Because Mark Cuban's out there, he's a billionaire, and he said, bro, this is messed up. So let's literally get folks like, their antibiotics and shit at cost, so that's just, a general thing. I'm always, it's cool when people of means do shit that helps people. It's important. But yeah, man. So there's so much talking about the value creation going forward for Cardano. Shout out to the pumpkin timer, bro. It's about 58 minutes deep. It's been kind of a free ramble. That's probably what a lot of these are going to be, because I tend to do that. But that's also why, trying to keep it fresh. And again, this isn't just going to be just a Cardano thing. It's a all of it thing. You know what I mean? Sometimes I'll be talking about all of it, whatever's interesting. Maybe it's mathematics, maybe it's the fights coming up, maybe it's cool. Like, I'm really looking forward to the Xander Zayas versus Boots Ennis fight. Oh my god, that's a whole ass thing. And again, that's a whole other thing, bro. Talking about how to get these projects making money. Odds markets are a huge thing, right? So if we had folks talking about, yo, what are we betting on this weekend? You got something like a UFC, you've got fights every Saturday. So these projects building on Cardano with a little bit of support can start having, hey, look, the SNEC community and the Mallard Order or the Strike community or some new meme coin or cross-chain. XRP is going to roll through because there's folks in the XRP or Solana or Ethereum, and then we start picking parlays the night before the events. And then we have a website where it's like, oh, look, and we can look at the history, and we start having a group of folks that maybe we start tracking. Oh, wow. They're consistently hitting a 3-play parlay every Saturday night. Right. So we start doing that analytical work, right? And that becomes a fun, cool thing if you're a fan of the fights or if you're a fan of making money, right? And also you just start having vibe, whatever. And we have transactions cooking on Cardano, guys. Again, this is not rocket science. This is what we should have been doing. Imagine that, Wolf Oden, right? But that's the thing, bro. This is the kind of shit that if the right people were empowered, and shout out to Pete and Lily and Linda and James and everyone. But again, there's levels to this game and people have different skills. And there's another thing. Why, like a Wendy O, shout out to her. I really like her discussion on the Clarity Act. She's calling it like it is. She's like, this is some bullshit ass banker's bill, and she's right. But it is right. It's some criminal ass shit when you really think about it. Yeah, these industry players are not about a free and fair market, because and that's all I ask for, because we'll eat your lunch. We will, and we must. Right? Like, yeah, man, shout out to Bodega. For sure, shout out to Bodega. But right, hey, and I just saw also, just like Strike Perpetuals is incentivizing to add liquidity, and then you can borrow stablecoin liquidity based on your liquidity deposits, basically. So like, let's say you put in $50,000 of liquidity to Strike Perpetuals. You get $3,000. I'm just pulling a number out of my ass, just going off some tweet that I saw. But it's a new thing. So you can tap some of that liquidity without liquidating yourself. Very, very cool, that kind of shit. But yeah, so Bodega has also been trying to survive in this messed up cabal regime where projects are not being supported and celebrated in the way that they should by founding entities and whatnot. And yeah, man, and these projects too, you've got to get the right people in the right spot. But there's things like this, man. It's like these Jake Paul fights, right? I don't know who the hell that guy's gonna fight next. Like, although I called a lot, man. Anyway, but yeah. So but Bodega recently announced that they were doing some kind of like cool shit where they were like, they're just expanding their wings because they're realizing we need to get liquidity flowing from multiple different paths. But again, I think another thing that exponentiates value creation is if you have, again, the SNET community, for instance, and an NFT community that come together on a Saturday night. We meet in a Discord, right? We have a live stream like this. Right. And again, this is going to evolve. Right. I'm getting StreamYard going. And then I can be like, hey, yo, I see Chicken. I see Wolfen in. And we start sharing out these links and shit. Right. And we start connecting. And then boom, you got all of us on there. And then maybe boom, we pull up Bodega. Right. And then they go, oh, shit. The SNEC, fam, funded a wallet. And they just put $7,000 on da-da-da. Right. Like, again, there's this Freedom 250 card. And of course, it's a wild thing, like with the whole like French Revolution, let them eat cake, is circuses and games from Rome. Talk about a falling empire, bro. It's crazy work. But that's a big event that's going to be coming up, And so things like that, like Ilya Taporia, for folks who don't know, Ilya Taporia is fighting a guy named Justin Gaethje right now. Someone like me that at one time, I'm a big fan of combat sports because there's just so much there. It's just so much. There's a lot of human beauty in it and a lot of layers. I like that your body is your instrument. I like the fact that you are competing in such an essential way. And often the distinction is your will to win, and your intellect and what you put in. That is so profound. And then when you look at like older athletes, and it's the same thing like track and field and whatnot, but like with combat sports, the consequence of failure is so wild. And so when you see these athletes like Usyk, the boxing heavyweight champion of the world, had a boxing fight at the foot of the Great Pyramids in Egypt with because he's done so well, he's undefeated. He fought the world heavyweight kickboxing champion, a guy named Rico Verhoeven. And he was losing that damn fight. And then they had to do all this like crookery and tookery. But the point is, Alexander Usyk, I think, is like 38 or 39. So that's deep. Like that's 35 is the number where you can't really say that the clock beats you, time beat you, father time beat you. They say father time is undefeated. And when you look at the probabilities, people becoming champion over the age of 35, vanishingly rare. It's special. It's really special. So things like that, right? Like, so we've got this like main event, Justin Gaethje, 38 years old, I believe, 155er, fighting a guy who's like 28, 29, 31, however old Ilya Taporia is. It's just going to be wild. money odds are on Ilya. You know what I mean? So you would look at, but again, is that, so things like that are cultivating community, getting people So on Friday night before the fights, we have maybe folks from SNEC and meme coin communities participating in things like live streams and whatnot. And then NFT community, and we start figuring it out. We talk about it, like what are the odds? Then we have like a group parlay, right? Where again, and it's just fun. You know what I mean? Everyone put in a dollar, and if we hit it, like especially if we do some crazy things, I think it would be fun and smart to do like regular three pick parlays because there's a very high probability, and especially if you cultivate a community that is conversant in the sport, and you start tracking what are the odds, how successful are we, and then so suddenly we have a cool culture event. People are learning, they're onboarding wallets and shit, so people that are interested in UFC and mixed martial arts and boxing and shit are learning about Cardano, learning about odds markets, cultivating community, right? And then Bodega, we start moving $1 million every weekend. These things, just having and shared objectives. Again, shout out to the Cardano Collective because that's another thing that is the intention. So definitely go join that Discord because the goal is to have a global nexus, a repository of exchange and information. Shout out to SNEC and whatnot. Like really, we proofed that recipe, how to cook that. So the Cardano Collective, the goal is to be an emergent fourth entity, to have a free market competition, to have coordinated efforts to set and again, bro, there's value in saying we're going to get ADA to $1 by July 4th. We should have been cooking that starting around this time last year. A lot of it, man. Many of us were anyway. So I'm actually encouraged because I think markets do cook later this year. I think Clarity Act is going to pass. TLDRs, I think we're going to have a major liquidity event with SpaceX and Anthropic IPOs. The investors that are participating in that are conversant in blockchain. So when that liquidity rolls back and people are booking profit, would not be surprised to see it roll into the Bitcoin layer and into these blockchain layers, right? And if you think about it, you have SpaceX, Anthropic, Clarity Act. You know what I mean? Now, again, I believe Clarity Act will be passed. It's going to be a midnight announcement kind of thing. It'll be gamed like a lot of these things are. But so yeah, so when you see those flows, I think Saylor dropped some tea leaves earlier today. Was calling in some, because yeah, dude, why is Nancy Pelosi successful? Because the unfortunate reality is the people that are passing our laws that have impact on all of these things. The SpaceX IPO is being granted all kinds of exceptions and whatnot. Man, there's just so much there. But man, it's so wild that Coinbase is offering pre-IPO perpetuals, but to non-US residents. It's so crazy, dude. People are going to get, people are going to make a lot of money. People are going to lose a lot of money in the SpaceX IPO. It is exciting though. And so that's all part of this, and that is the intention of this, is to create media flow, education, exponentiation of value creation. We become better, better conversation with Bitcoin. Bitcoin is, they need help, because you've got basically Michael Saylor and all the paid for suits and toxic assholes. That's, and then Randy Hipper is out there. Shout out to Randy. But and other than that, Bitcoin's just and the people that are talking about it aren't talking about it in the way to actually educate and empower the people that it was created to empower, right? I guarantee you Satoshi Nakamoto did not create Bitcoin to give privileged advantage to the institutional class that it was intended to decouple power from. So educating people and having those conversations about that interoperability, right? Because that's the other thing that has been, interoperability is the obvious outcome, and it's the obvious, if you're into freedom, right? We might not get there. Matrix, that there is a probability. Well, the Matrix is live. It's live, and it's growing more powerful. And the Matrix, man, you got the Matrix of media. Look at who owns televisions, platforms, all that shit. Look at who owns the Matrix of money, the Matrix of politics. It has been aggressively live since last year, really, but Palantir, all these things, These are real realities. And again, the jobs market, AI job displacement, young folks going, college doesn't make sense. And amen. It does it, right? Not really. So for many, anyway, you know what I mean? Like if you're like, no, I want to be the best heart surgeon that's ever been, then yeah, go to college for sure. You know what I mean? Especially if your family's going to pay for it, it's a great experience. There's good things there, but now the vast preponderance of the value is going to be, there is still something to be said for a curated curriculum. But the big win is the networking, the because especially because when you education attracts more moneyed people and go-getters, so you get a bunch of people that are go-getting together, and especially at these Ivy Leagues and whatnot, a lot of it's from the upper 10% ish of society, and so that's also why it's traditionally been a ladder, because the kid that keeps his grades up goes to community college for a couple of years, and then transfers into a university, is suddenly in there with Timothy and Rebecca, whose parents both went to Stanford, and that's the thing, man. Anyone that's been to these things, you meet a lot of those folks that grew up in great families, man, fortunate, stable, good families where people are looking after their babies, and so yeah, so there's the social value of going to those, because then that you can make friends, So yeah, that family may be a multi-millionaire or billionaire situation, and you're coming up from the cut, but you both working together on an engineering project, or you're both taking Western civilization, or you're both trying to get through that drama class. You know what I mean? Again, though, for the electives, bro, especially if no one's paying for you, get that done at community college, especially if you did not have the strongest high school academic, whatever. But I digress. But it's about cooking these new recipes and alternatives for folks, and young people, absolutely, and just people in general. Like when we look at the rent is too damn high, I mean, boomers get a lot of flack, and deservedly so in many ways, but we can't leave them behind either. And it is important to understand that at least until a little bit ago, I think because it is so bad out there for millennials, basically if you're 40 and under, it's been bad for you. But boomers were the fastest growing homeless demographic by about eight months ago. Because a lot of these folks are, on fixed incomes, fixed salaries. Some old woman, her husband died, whatever, had a pension, maybe that ran out, whatever, And meanwhile, this lady, that's been trying to like just live on maybe Social Security, is living in this world with the rest of us. So when the toilet paper went crazy, when the eggs got doing this and that and the other, these people that are on fixed incomes are like, I have $1,200 a month, and I'm an 87-year-old woman, that with whatever she did, you know what I mean? So those are the people that are also losing their homes, so it's not just young folks living in cars, it's a lot of older people too. So like the education and creating hope, how oppressed people escape, and again, I think Cardano landed the plane here, because I did want to keep this. I was thinking between 1 to 3 hours. I'm going, like, I know that I could ramble. I know I could ramble for at least 3 hours, and I'm kind of thinking that will be the way to do this. The goal, consistency, right? Like we got to, so I mean, a daily stream would be dope, would do wonders for Cardano and just the whole thing. I don't mean to toot my fucking own horn, but damn it, just having a sensible conversation, to get people going, oh, okay, I guess so. So you mean we can talk about Bitcoin and advocate for Bitcoin and not be assholes about it, and actually help people acquire more Bitcoin over time and educate a global community that can allow the people to become the masters of the destiny of these spot prices, by teaching the custody, the spectrum of custody options and all these things, you know what I mean? So yeah, and then sometimes we'll just be talking about something entirely different, or yeah, bodega, maybe it'll be a Friday night before a Saturday night, and we do, a pre-fight thing where we come together, we have a cross-chain vibe session saying, all right, guys, what are we going to bet at Bodega Cardano, which again, Bodega is an odds market on Cardano. I heard that someone is launching another one maybe on midnight. I don't know. But yeah, check it out. But yeah, consistency is key. Yeah, and so the goal is to be consistent, to try to start getting regular live streams and to come up together, right? I'm in the cut with you, right? I'm like a lot of the members in the community. Got to figure it out. It is not easy, especially if you have had any of your capital in Cardano. I'm sorry, like to every Cardano, like the native assets, man, it is so messed up, dude. Like what they did with the midnight airdrop, not giving any allocation to Cardano native asset holders. Like that to me is so insane. But that's that cabal stuff. So folks who don't know what I'm talking about, when they did the airdrop for night, only people with ADA got the night airdrop. So that advantages a lot of the OG whales in Japan, where the ICO, the initial coin offering, occurred. So you've got folks for tax reasons, so I get it, that haven't been participating in the ecosystem, that were like participants in this in the voucher sale. So they sold some vouchers, which would allow you to claim underlying and or their associated ADA, units of ADA. So yeah, a lot of these people though they got it. They're like, cool. They delegated it to a stake pool. Now that's another thing. A lot of these whales maybe have been low key selling it, because there's a lot of ways that you could do it where you don't touch the initial whatever. Say you got you got 5 million ADA. Let's just random number. You're some woman in Japan, and you got that 5 million ADA, and then you delegated it to stake pools. So now that 5 million ADA is generating, like I did the a while ago, last time I was looking at it. But it was something like every 1,000-ish ADA would yield about 1 ADA every 5 days, something like this. But the point is, if you had multi-million ADA and you've just delegated it to a stake pool, you've got a couple of options. Like the super whatever would be to allow it to just compound, let the ADA generate ADA, and then your ADA grows. So you started with 5 million, then over the course of time, right, you got 5.2, and then 5.3, 5.5, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then the 5.5, and because now you have more, as the emission, as the size of the reward every epoch, every 5 days, as that diminishes, as it attenuates basically over the course of time, your larger stake will kind of help hedge it. You get this native hedging. I'm going down the rabbit hole a little bit, but the point is folks for different reasons were making money a different way. But then when you've got, like, if you think about it, who is the average like Cardano token holder? Who is the one that's out here buying bodega market, right? So for folks who don't like what bodega is, it's an odds market, right? So if there's a football game or a basketball game or a UFC fight, you can take odds on that, and all the other things people could take odds on. And you can buy these bodega tokens, and bodega tokens allow you to create your own odds market. Right. So, for instance, that would be a thing with talk about compensating content creators. Shout out to Quasar. Cabaret Voltaire. That's strong. I like that. Because you got, anyway. But yeah, shout out to Quasar. But yeah. So imagine you've got content creators, a group of regular people. We're getting together on Friday nights talking about fights. Where we're having this meme community, XRP and Solana and whatnot. We come together, we do our odds, we pick some parlays and whatnot, and together we're running our own odds market on Bodega. So we're creating an auspice for people to engage with Bodega anyway. Bodega has tokens that say, hey, yeah, you want to help grow Bodega, buy some Bodega tokens, and you can start your own odds market. You can create your own odds. You can make your own markets. And so it allows you to participate not only in the revenue that you can generate with your odds market, but I believe there's participation platform wide as well. I mean, that would be a more sound model, because you kind of, but obviously it should also it should skew towards your markets. And I would imagine that you probably do, like, I don't know. I would probably go like maybe 80-20-ish, someone sets up a market, 80% to them, 20% to platform wide. That way everyone's kind of hedging, So if like Samantha and Tiffany get like, just go crazy with some niche thing, you know what I mean? And people are using their odds market, everyone's like, oh shit, keep going, Tiff and Nancy, But anyway, so yeah, these are ways in which we can start creating, auspices for education, because that's the other thing, right? It's like you get people together talking about things they're enjoying, and then they're learning about, hey, what is the cool new thing that's happening with Strike Perpetuals? And if you think about it, if it's things like MMA and boxing and whatnot, people are definitely down to make money, and especially if they like the vibe, right? If they like, the people that show up on the Cardano spaces, and they're like, hell yeah, bro, and look, they pick a parlay every week and they get it right 87% of the time. So, I mean, and think about that, right? Then we just set up a bot. And if we had our own market, we do that. Like, oh yeah, like every Saturday night we go 1,000 ADA and 1,000 midnight and 0.001 Bitcoin. That's just what we do with our own, that's the house's wallet, So there's things like this that start creating value for Bodega, get transactions cooking on Cardano, bringing new people in, cultivating community. This is why these are the people you pay, dude. People that have a little bit of woo and a little bit of charisma, and that can make friends. Chuck, you do not buy girlfriends and you don't buy your friends. You know what I mean? You want the lady that's there for you, you're not the one that you got to buy, because that shit, that doesn't last, man. But yeah, so yeah, shout out to these markets again. It's 6-8. So yeah, it's 120. Shout out to Quasar. So I'm actually glad that I went a little bit longer than the hour. Because again, I was thinking about between 1 and 3. But if we, I know that the longer that the stream goes, typically, the better, the better it is, as far as gaining traction and sharing it, whatnot. But really the key to me is going to be consistency. And yeah, man, we're making a lot of trade-offs because again, if you've been investing in Cardano, you're not doing well. A lot of us are not doing well financially, so you're not alone. You're not alone out there, so we build together we rise. We figure out how can we make this money make money, because I know together we can make this money make money, and if we start getting that collective of folks that know how to make that money make money, and we get those folks feeling secure, so that's okay, shit. They got their bills paid. They can keep their lights on. Well, then they can be doing the daily live stream, going live to YouTube and Kick and Twitch. And then we can cut those little TikTok videos, start all the things, man, So yeah, join the Cardano Collective, the Discord. So here's a couple things. So we wanted to be an emergent entity and whatnot. There's a couple great primary, first objectives as a community. The Discord, I do like keeping it kind of simple and clean. Global Nexus is better. You want most conversation kind of happening in a shared space, but I think it makes sense because again, one of the things that we've lacked on Cardano is we need someone with a Babe Ruth situation, right? You need someone to take the man, the mound, point to the sky and crack that bish, hit the home run, so that's things like open objectives, like getting ADA to $1. You know what I mean? Getting SNEC to a penny, literally just having shared objectives as a community. It adds more power. Then everyone knows, well, at least we're going for, so they can contextualize the degree of our success or failure, and it literally gives us a target to aim for, so it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous. Just the lack of marketing and getting the right people involved. But we're here, bro, and we're gonna do this. And I'm bullish, bro. I am so bullish, and that is true. I've been really low key because I didn't know that, and nor did any of us know that this Band-Aid moment was gonna happen. Like for all of the market turmoil and whatnot, and again, shout out to Cardano. I mean, the chart's looking pretty good. And again, for context, Bitcoin in the last 24 is up 2.41, Cardano's up 3.31, Litecoin 2.54, Solana 2.72. So Cardano's outperforming all of them, including Bitcoin, as of right now. So at this level, crazy power. Because again, remember, for every one Bitcoin, there's 2,143 ADA. So things like this, that's called a Bitcoin normalized unit. When you take maximum supply of your thing divided by 21 million, maximum supply of Bitcoin. If it doesn't have a maximum supply, then you're calculating basically a dynamic BNU or a synthetic BNU. So like Ethereum and Monero and Solana, that you don't have a unit value, that you can say, oh, that's how many for every one, and forevermore rest, hold your peace, whereas, yeah, only going to be 84 million Litecoin. only going to be 45 billion Cardano ADA. So, so again, we calculated it on this live stream. It's about $365 USD to be the equivalent of like a whole coiner to own 2,143 ADA. Really cool, So pieces of information like that to be like, bro, yeah, we're not saying go all in, but if you want to also, because think about that too. If you've got people that are custodying at least one unit, we're again imposing honesty on the spot price, which is also why, again, like Litecoin and Cardano, but really Litecoin is the best positioned asset to become the decentralized freedom capital liquidity layer, because it touches everything. The depth is there. It's got on ramps, off ramps. It's got built in privacy. We can flash honesty. Most of the people in your phone can afford the $200 to migrate for Litecoin off of a centralized exchange into their self custody. Average person doesn't have $63,455 to move one Bitcoin. So when you think about the opportunities to levy consequential impact on the spot price, whereas when Michael Saylor owns so much of Bitcoin, and whatnot, they can, these large and small layer. Oh no, it says connection was unstable. So I don't know, but I think this does some sort of whatever. I don't know if y'all are still there, but yeah. Um, Let me see what's going on over here. Yeah, sorry.